My wife raised her wine glass at dinner and announced to everyone, "Dylan comes first. You're always second, Michael." I smiled and kept eating, but something inside me snapped forever. What happened next destroyed their perfect little family hierarchy and left them begging for mercy they'd never shown me. My name is Michael Elliott. I'm 62 years old, and I own 4 pawn shops across Phoenix. Built them from nothing over the past 25 years. I know the value of things: gold, diamonds, antiques, collectibles. What I apparently never learned was how to value myself in my own home. The night everything started falling apart was supposed to be a celebration. Brenda, my wife of 8 years, had invited her sister Janet and brother-in-law Tom over for dinner. We were celebrating Dylan getting what he called a business opportunity. Though knowing Dylan, that could mean anything from selling energy drinks to starting another failed podcast. I'd grilled steaks on the back patio, opened a bottle of wine that cost more than most people spend on groceries in a week. The table looked perfect with Brenda's good china, the stuff she inherited from her grandmother. Everything seemed normal until Dylan raised his glass. "Here's to family," Dylan announced, standing up with that cocky grin he'd worn since he was 16 and realized my wallet would always be open to him. "And to Mom, who's always had my back no matter what." "Always," Brenda replied, clinking her glass against his. Then she looked right at me with this smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Dylan comes first in this house. He always has, and he always will. You're always second, Michael." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, but she said it so casually, like she was commenting on the weather. Janet and Tom both shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Tom cleared his throat and took a long sip of wine. Janet suddenly became very interested in cutting her steak. I set my fork down slowly, keeping my expression neutral. 25 years in the pawn business teaches you to control your reactions, especially when someone's trying to get under your skin. But inside, something shifted, something permanent. "Good to know where I stand," I said quietly, picking up my wine glass. Brenda laughed, actually laughed. "Oh, come on, Michael. Don't be so sensitive. You knew what you were getting into when you married me. Dylan's my son. And I'm your husband," I replied, still keeping my voice level. "Yes, but Dylan's my blood," she shot back. You're just Michael. Just Michael." Like I was some random guy who wandering off the street, instead of the man who'd been paying for Dylan's car insurance, cell phone bills, and various failed business ventures for the better part of a decade. I finished my wine in silence, while conversation awkwardly resumed around the table. Dylan started talking about his latest scheme, something involving cryptocurrency and energy drinks. I wasn't really listening anymore. I was thinking about the safe in my office, the one Brenda didn't know existed. The one where I kept copies of all our important documents, including some papers she'd probably forgotten she'd ever signed. After Janet and Tom left, making hasty excuses about early morning meetings, I helped clear the table. Brenda was humming in the kitchen, washing dishes like nothing had happened. "You really meant what you said tonight," I said, drying a plate. "About what?" she asked without turning around. "About me being second." She shrugged. "It's just the truth, Michael. I thought you understood that." I folded the dish towel and set it on the counter. "I understand perfectly now." That night, after Brenda fell asleep, I went to my office and opened that safe. Time to remind myself exactly what I was worth and what I wasn't willing to lose. The next morning, I woke up before dawn like I had every day for the past 30 years. Military habits die hard, even when you've been out of the service for decades. Brenda was still sleeping, sprawled across 3/4 of our king-size bed like she owned the whole thing. Which, according to last night's dinner conversation, maybe she thought she did. I made coffee in the kitchen, standing at the window watching the sunrise paint the desert sky orange and pink. Phoenix mornings are beautiful, but that morning the beauty felt hollow. Like looking at a painting of something you used to love, but lost. Around 7, Dylan shuffled into the kitchen wearing yesterday's clothes and that glazed look he got when he'd been up all night, working on projects. In Dylan's world, that could mean anything from day trading with money he didn't have to writing business plans that would never see the light of day. "Morning, Mike," he said, opening my refrigerator like he lived here. Which, technically, he did more often than not. "It's Michael," I corrected, like I had 100 times before. He grabbed orange juice straight from the carton, drinking it without bothering to get a glass. "Right, Michael. Listen, I want to talk to you about something." Here it comes, I thought. Another brilliant business opportunity that would require my financial backing. I've been thinking about what Mom said last night, Dylan continued, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. About family priorities and all that. Have you? Yeah. And I think it's cool that you get it. That you understand where you fit in here. He said it like he was doing me a favor by explaining my place in my own home. I set my coffee mug down carefully. Where exactly do I fit in, Dylan? Well, you're like the provider, you know? The guy who makes sure everything runs smooth. Mom and I, we're the real family. You're more like. He paused, searching for the word. Support staff. Support staff. In my own house. Using my own electricity to keep orange juice cold in my own refrigerator. Support staff. I repeated. Don't take it wrong, Michael. It's an important job. We appreciate you. The way he said appreciate reminded me of how I talked to the kid who bagged groceries at the store. Polite but distant. Temporary. That's generous of you, I said. Dylan either missed the sarcasm or chose to ignore it. Anyway, I want to run something by you. I've got this opportunity to get in on the ground floor of this new app. It's like Uber, but for dog walking. Of course it is. I just need about $5,000 to buy in. Mom said you'd probably be cool with it since you're part of the team now. Part of the team. The support staff part, apparently. I looked at Dylan, really looked at him. 28 years old, never held a job for more than 6 months, never paid his own rent, never had to worry about where his next meal was coming from, because good old Michael would always be there with his wallet open. I'll think about it, I said. Awesome. Mom said you'd come around. He started heading back toward the stairs, then turned around. Oh, and thanks for understanding about the family thing. It's nothing personal. Nothing personal. Just my entire life being reclassified as a service position. After he left, I sat alone in my kitchen, thinking about safes and documents and the difference between being appreciated and being respected. It was going to be an interesting day. That afternoon, I drove to First National Bank downtown. My personal banker, Robert Anderson, had been handling my accounts for over 15 years. He was one of those old school guys who understood that discretion was worth more than small talk. Michael, Robert said, standing up from behind his mahogany desk. Good to see you. What brings you in today? I set my briefcase on the chair beside me and pulled out a manila folder. I need to make some adjustments to my accounts, Robert. Estate planning stuff. He nodded, settling back into his chair. Of course. What kind of adjustments are we talking about? I opened the folder and pulled out the first document. I want to remove Brenda as beneficiary on my life insurance policy. She'll keep her access to the joint checking account, but everything else needs to be restructured. Robert's eyebrows went up slightly, but he didn't ask questions. That's why I've been banking with him for 15 years. I also want to set up a new business account, I continued. Something separate from our joint accounts. I'm thinking about expanding the pawn shop operations, maybe opening a 5th location. Smart move, Robert said, pulling out the necessary paperwork. Real estate market's been good for commercial properties. For the next hour, we worked through the details. New account structures, updated beneficiary forms, revised access permissions. Every signature felt like cutting another thread that had been holding me down. One more thing, I said as we wrapped up. I want to transfer ownership of the Scottsdale pawn shop into the new business entity. Make it clean and separate. No problem. That'll take about a week to process. I shook his hand and left the bank feeling lighter than I had in months. Brenda had no idea that the Scottsdale location was worth more than our house. She never paid attention to the business side of things, always assuming the money would just keep flowing. That evening, I sat in my office reviewing insurance documents when Brenda knocked on the door. Michael, dinner's ready. Be right there. I called back. I looked at the papers spread across my desk, bank statements, business licenses, property deeds, all the building blocks of a life I'd worked 30 years to create. Tomorrow, I'd start phase 2. Time to remind everyone exactly who owned what around here. 3 days later, Dylan cornered me in the garage while I was working on my truck. He had that eager look he got whenever he thought he'd figured out a new angle to separate me from my money. Michael, I'm glad I caught you, he said, leaning against my workbench like he belonged there. I want to talk to you about that app opportunity. I continued changing the oil filter, not looking up. What about it? Well, I've been doing more research, and this thing is going to be huge. The founder used to work for Google, and they've already got interest from some major investors. Uh-huh. The thing is, the buy-in window closes this Friday. After that, it goes to the next funding round, and the minimum investment jumps to 50 grand. Of course it did. There was always some artificial deadline designed to create urgency. So you still need 5,000, I said. Actually, I was thinking bigger. Dylan's voice got that excited pitch it always got when he was about to ask for serious money. If I put in 10 grand, I get a bigger stake. And if this thing takes off like I think it will, we're talking about life-changing money, Michael. I wiped my hands on a shop rag and finally looked at him. Well, yeah. I mean, technically it would be my investment, but you get your money back plus interest. Think of it like a loan. Like all the other loans I'd given him over the years. The ones that somehow never got paid back. Tell me about this founder, I said. Dylan's face lit up. His name is Brandon Tech. Well, that's his business name. He's this young genius who figured out how to optimize route efficiency for service workers. The app connects dog owners with walkers, but the real innovation is in the algorithm. Brandon Tech, I repeated. And you've met him? Well, not in person, but I've been on video calls with his team. They're super professional. I nodded slowly. And where exactly is this company based? It's a virtual company. That's the beauty of it. Low overhead, maximum efficiency. A virtual company run by someone called Brandon Tech, who Dylan had never met in person. It sounded exactly like the kind of scam that separated fools from their money every day. I'll tell you what, Dylan, I said, closing the hood of my truck. Let me think about it over the weekend. 10,000 is a significant investment. Awesome. I knew you'd see the potential. He started heading back toward the house, then turned around. Oh, and Mom wanted me to tell you, she's planning something special for next week. Some kind of surprise. After he left, I stood in my garage thinking about dog walking apps and surprise plans. In my business, I'd learned to spot desperation from a mile away. People brought me their grandmother's jewelry, their father's tools, their wedding rings, always with a story about how temporary the situation was, how they'd be back to buy everything back next week. Dylan had that same desperate energy, that same elaborate story designed to make a bad deal sound like an opportunity. The difference was, in my business, people at least offered collateral. Friday evening, I was in my office when I heard the front door slam. Through my window, I watched Dylan storm across the driveway to his beat-up Honda Civic. The engine coughed to life, and he peeled out of the driveway like his tail was on fire. Brenda appeared in my office doorway a few minutes later, her face flushed with anger. Dylan just told me what you said to him, she announced, crossing her arms. What did I say to him? You told him his investment opportunity was a scam. You embarrassed him, Michael. I leaned back in my chair and looked at her. I told him I'd researched his dog walking app and found some red flags. The company address is a mailbox in a strip mall, and Brandon Tech doesn't exist in any business registry. That doesn't mean it's a scam. Brenda, he wanted $10,000 for a company that exists only as a website. In my business, we call that fraud. Her eyes flashed. Your business. Always your business. God forbid you support Dylan's dreams for once. I've supported plenty of his dreams. The food truck that never got built. The dropshipping business that lost money. The cryptocurrency mining operation that fried our electrical system. Those were learning experiences. Those were expensive lessons that I paid for. I stood up and walked to my safe, punching in a combination. Since we're talking about Dylan's financial history, maybe you'd like to see this. I pulled out a thick folder and handed it to her. Inside were copies of every check I'd written to Dylan over the past 5 years. Every bank transfer, every emergency loan that had never been repaid. Brenda flipped through the pages, her expression changing from anger to confusion to something that might have been shock. $47,000, I said quietly. That's what your son has cost me in 5 years. Not including the car insurance, the cell phone bills, or the groceries he eats when he stays here. I didn't realize it was that much. Because you never asked. You just assumed the money would always be there. She closed the folder and set it on my desk. Dylan's going through a tough time. He's trying to find himself. He's 28 years old, Brenda. If he hasn't found himself by now, maybe it's time to stop looking in my wallet. The silence stretched between us like a canyon. Finally, she spoke. What are you saying, Michael? I'm saying the Bank of Michael Elliott is officially closed for business. She stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked away without another word. I heard her bedroom door close upstairs, followed by the muffled sound of a phone conversation that went on for over an hour. I didn't need to guess who she was calling. The call came at 6:30 Tuesday morning. I was drinking coffee and reading the paper when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Michael Elliott?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes. This is Officer Patricia Williams with Phoenix PD. I'm calling about an incident involving Dylan Reed. Are you his stepfather?" My stomach dropped. "Yes. What happened?" "Mr. Reed was involved in a single-vehicle accident early this morning. He's in stable condition at St. Joseph's Hospital, but there are some complications we need to discuss." "What kind of complications?" "Mr. Reed was arrested at the scene for driving under the influence. His blood alcohol was .15. The vehicle he was driving is registered to Brenda Elliott. Is that your wife?" I set my coffee mug down carefully. "Yes, it is." "Mr. Elliott, the vehicle was totaled, and there's significant property damage. Mr. Reed hit a retaining wall outside a shopping center. The property owner is pressing charges for the damage, which is estimated at around $15,000. $15,000, plus whatever legal fees Dylan would need, plus the fact that he'd been driving Brenda's car without my knowledge." "Officer Williams, what's the bail situation?" "Bail has been set at $25,000. Someone will need to post that before Mr. Reed can be released." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen thinking about phone calls and consequences. Dylan had been driving Brenda's car, the Lexus I'd been making payments on for 3 years. The car that was technically in her name, but financed through her joint account. My phone rang again. This time it was Brenda. "Michael, thank God you answered," she said, her voice shaky. "Dylan's in the hospital. There was an accident." "I know. The police called me. We need to get him out of jail. The bail is $25,000. I walked to my window and looked out at the desert morning. Clear skies, not a cloud in sight. "Michael, did you hear me?" "I heard you. So you'll take care of it." "Will I take care of what?" "Exactly. The bail money. We need to get Dylan out of there." "Why would I do that?" The silence on the other end of the line was so long, I thought the call had dropped. "Because he's family," she finally said. "According to you, I'm just support staff. Remember? Second place in this family hierarchy." "Michael, this isn't the time for what? For remembering exactly where I stand in your priorities? I think this is the perfect time." I hung up the phone and went back to reading my newspaper. 20 minutes later, it rang again. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again, and again. By noon, I'd received 14 calls from Brenda and 6 from Dylan himself, calling from jail. I didn't answer any of them. Second place doesn't pay bail money. By Thursday morning, the calls had escalated to a full-scale assault on my peace of mind. Brenda had enlisted reinforcements, her sister Janet, her mother, even Dylan's high school girlfriend who I'd met exactly twice. They all had the same message. I was being unreasonable, Dylan needed help, and family meant forgiveness. The voicemails were getting desperate. Brenda's voice was hoarse from crying. "Michael, please. He's been in jail for 3 days. You're the only one who can help us." Dylan's calls had shifted from anger to what he probably thought was strategic manipulation. "Look, Michael, I know we've had our differences, but I'm ready to change. This could be my wake-up call, but only if you help me get out of here." I deleted each message without listening to the end. Thursday afternoon, Brenda showed up at my shop. I was in the back office when my manager, Tony, knocked on the door. "Boss, your wife's here. She looks pretty upset." Through the security monitor, I could see Brenda in the showroom, pacing between the jewelry cases and the electronics section. Her hair was a mess, her makeup smudged. She looked like she'd been sleeping in her car. "Tell her I'm in a meeting," I said. "She says she'll wait." "Then tell her the meeting might last all day." Tony hesitated. "Boss, she's crying. It's making the customers uncomfortable." I looked at the monitor again. Brenda was indeed crying, but there was something calculated about it. The way she positioned herself where everyone could see her, the theatrical dabbing at her eyes with tissues. "Tell her to leave, Tony. If she doesn't, call the police." An hour later, she was gone. But the drama wasn't over. That evening, my neighbor Frank knocked on my door. He was holding a manila envelope. "Michael, I hate to get involved in family business, but this was left on my porch with a note asking me to give it to you." Inside the envelope are photographs. Dylan in his jail cell, looking appropriately miserable. Dylan in court wearing an orange jumpsuit. A copy of the medical report from his accident, highlighting a concussion and some bruised ribs. The note was in Brenda's handwriting. He's your stepson. You helped raise him. Don't let your pride destroy what's left of this family. I handed the envelope back to Frank. Frank, if anyone else leaves anything on your porch for me, just throw it away. You got it, buddy. That night, I sat in my office with a glass of bourbon, thinking about pride and family and the difference between helping someone and enabling them. Dylan had been making bad decisions for years, always with the safety net of knowing I'd bail him out. Maybe it was time he learned what consequences actually felt like. The phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Elliott? This is Public Defender Sarah Martinez. I'm representing Dylan Reed. What can I do for you, counselor? Mr. Reed asked me to call you about his bail situation. He seems to think you might be willing to help. Mr. Reed is mistaken. Sir, I understand there might be family tensions, but your stepson is facing serious charges. A DUI with property damage could mean significant jail time. That sounds like a problem Dylan should have considered before getting behind the wheel drunk. There was a pause. Mr. Elliott, are you saying you won't help with bail? That's exactly what I'm saying. May I ask why? I thought about dinner parties and support staff and being told I was second place in my own home. Because some lessons are worth more than $25,000. Friday morning brought a new development. Brenda's entire family descended on my house like a plague of locusts. I watched from my office window as 3 cars pulled into my driveway. Janet and Tom, Brenda's mother Eleanor, and 2 people I didn't recognize but assumed were more relatives drawn to the drama. They didn't knock. They just walked in through the front door like they owned the place. I could hear them in my living room, voices raised in urgent conversation. Words like stubborn and heartless drifted down the hallway. After about 10 minutes, Brenda called out, Michael, we need to talk. I opened my office door and walked to the living room. The assembled family court looked like a scene from a bad daytime television show. Eleanor was holding tissues, Janet was pacing, and Tom looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Michael, Eleanor said, standing up with the authority of a woman who'd been matriarch of this family for 60 years. This nonsense has gone on long enough. What nonsense is that, Eleanor? You know exactly what I'm talking about. Dylan is sitting in jail because of your pride. I looked around the room at 5 pairs of eyes, all staring at me with varying degrees of disapproval. Dylan is sitting in jail because he drove drunk and destroyed someone's property, I said calmly. He made a mistake. Janet snapped. Everyone makes mistakes. Some mistakes cost $25,000 to fix. Brenda stepped forward, her hands clasped in front of her like she was praying. Michael, I'm begging you. I'll do anything. I'll get a job. I'll pay you back. You'll what, Brenda? Respect me as your husband instead of treating me like an ATM. Value my opinion instead of dismissing it. Stop putting Dylan's wants ahead of our marriage. The room went quiet. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. Is that what this is about? You're jealous of a mother's love for her child. I'm tired of being told I'm second place in my own marriage. Well, you are, Brenda shouted, finally dropping the tearful martyr act. Dylan is my son. He will always come first. That's what being a mother means. There it was. The truth, finally spoken out loud in front of witnesses. And that, I said quietly, is why second place doesn't pay. I walked back to my office and closed the door. Behind me, the yelling started immediately. Voices overlapping, accusations flying, Eleanor demanding to know what kind of man abandons family in their time of need. I opened my safe and pulled out a folder I'd been saving for this moment. Inside were copies of bank statements, canceled checks, and a detailed accounting of every dollar I'd spent on Dylan over the years. Also included were copies of the new account structures I'd set up, showing exactly which assets Brendan no longer had access to. 20 minutes later, the voices in the living room faded. Car doors slammed in the driveway. Engine started. I waited until the house was quiet, then walked back to the living room. It was empty except for Brenda, who was sitting on the couch staring at the floor. They're all gone, she said without looking up. I noticed. My own family thinks I'm a terrible wife. Are you? She finally looked at me, her eyes red and swollen. I don't know anymore. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Then I remembered the dinner party, the casual cruelty, the years of being taken for granted. Neither do I said, and walked back to my office. The folder full of financial documents sat open on my desk. Tomorrow, I'd start making some calls. It was time to see how much Dylan's freedom was really worth to the people who claimed to love him most. 2 weeks after Dylan's arrest, the pressure campaign reached its crescendo. Brenda had exhausted every family connection, every mutual friend, every guilt trip in her arsenal. The house felt like a war zone, with her camping out in the guest bedroom and me maintaining my fortress in the office. Tuesday evening, my phone rang with a call I'd been expecting but dreading. "Mr. Elliott, this is Detective James Rodriguez with Phoenix PD Financial Crimes Division." "Detective Rodriguez, we need to discuss some irregularities we've found regarding your wife and her access to your business accounts. I've been waiting for this shoe to drop." "What kind of irregularities?" "It appears someone has been attempting to transfer funds from your business account to cover bail money for Dylan Reed. The bank flagged it as potential fraud since the account holder, that's you, never authorized the transfers." I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. "Are you telling me my wife tried to steal from my business to bail out her son?" "That's what it looks like. The attempts were unsuccessful, but the intent appears clear. We'd like you to come in and file a formal complaint." After hanging up, I found Brenda in the kitchen, staring out the window at nothing. "Brenda," I said quietly. She turned around, and I could see the defeat in her eyes. "The detective called you." "Yes. I wasn't trying to steal from you, Michael. I was trying to save my son by committing fraud against your own husband." She started crying again, but this time there was no manipulation in it, just exhaustion and desperation. "I don't know how to be the mother of a man who's in jail. I don't know how to live with myself if something happens to him in there. And I don't know how to be married to someone who'd rather commit crimes than admit her son needs to face consequences. So what happens now?" I looked at this woman I'd once loved, really looked at her. Somewhere along the way, she'd become a stranger who happened to live in my house and share my bank account. "Now you call Dylan and tell him that his mother loves him enough to let him grow up. And us." I pulled out an envelope I've been carrying for days. "Divorce papers, already filed and processed. There is no us, Brenda. There hasn't been for a long time." She took the papers with shaking hands, scanning the first page. "You're really doing this. Dylan will be released in 3 to 5 years with good behavior. You can start your new life then, if you want, but you'll be starting it without me." She nodded slowly, tears falling onto the legal documents. "I'm sorry, Michael, for all of it. I know you are. But sorry doesn't change 8 years of being treated like a walking checkbook." The next morning, I watched her pack her belongings into her sister's car. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of consequences she'd never had to face before. As they drove away, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: peace. My phone rang one last time. Dylan's number from the county jail. This time I answered. "Hello, Dylan." "Michael?" "Thank God. Listen, I know things have been weird between us, but I really need—" "Dylan," I interrupted. "Your mother and I are getting divorced. I'm not your stepfather anymore, which means I'm not your problem anymore either." Silence on the other end. "But if you ever get out of there and decide you want to be an actual man instead of a professional victim, you know where to find me." I hung up before he could respond. Second place doesn't pay, but first place in your own life, that's priceless. 6 months later, I was standing in the backyard of my house now, officially and completely, watching the sunrise paint the desert sky in shades of gold and orange. The silence was profound, broken only by the distant hum of morning traffic and the occasional bird. The divorce had been finalized 3 weeks ago. Brenda had tried to fight for half the assets, but her attempted fraud had pretty much killed any sympathy the judge might have had. She'd ended up with enough money to start over, but not enough to maintain the lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to on my dime. Dylan had been sentenced to 18 months, plus restitution for the property damage. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that Brenda had moved back in with her mother and taken a job at a department store. Eleanor, apparently, was not impressed with her daughter's life choices. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my business partner Tony, who'd bought into the pawn shop operation after the divorce freed up some capital. "New location in Tempe is killing it. You ready to look at that Tucson property?" I smiled and typed back, "Set up the meeting." Building something felt good again. For the first time in years, I was making decisions based on what I wanted, not what someone else needed. My doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. I walked through the house, noting how much larger it felt without the constant tension that had filled it for so long. Frank from next door was standing on my porch, holding a manila envelope. "Morning, Michael. This was left on my porch again, addressed to you." I took the envelope, recognizing Brenda's handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photograph. The photo showed Dylan in his prison uniform, but he looked different, cleaner somehow, healthier. His eyes had lost that entitled glaze I'd grown so tired of. The letter was short. "Michael, Dylan wanted me to send this. He's been working in the prison library, helping other inmates get their GEDs. He asked me to tell you he finally understands what you meant about earning respect instead of demanding it. He doesn't expect anything from you, but he wanted you to know he's trying to become the man you always said he could be." Brenda. I studied the photo for a long moment. Maybe prison would teach Dylan what 8 years of free money couldn't. Maybe not. Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. I folded the letter and put it in my pocket, not because I was planning to reach out, but because sometimes growth deserves acknowledgement, even from a distance. That afternoon, I drove to the new Tempe location. The shop was busy, filled with customers who understood the value of things. People who brought me their treasures not because they were entitled to money, but because they needed it and were willing to work for it. As I watched Tony help a young mother pawn her grandmother's ring to pay for car repairs, I thought about value and respect and the difference between being needed and being appreciated. My phone rang. Unknown number, but I answered anyway. "Is this Michael Elliott?" "Yes. Mr. Elliott, my name is Sarah Williams. I'm a real estate agent, and I have a client who's very interested in making an offer on your Scottsdale pawn shop location." I leaned back in my chair and smiled. "I'm listening." The offer was good. Very good. Enough to fund the Tucson expansion and still have plenty left over for whatever came next. As I hung up, I realized something that had taken me 62 years to learn. When you stop accepting second place in your own life, amazing things become possible. The sun was setting over Phoenix, painting the sky in brilliant shades of red and purple. I had dinner plans with some friends from the Rotary Club, people who valued my opinions and respected my time. People who understood that true family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about mutual respect and shared values. I locked up the shop and headed home to get ready for dinner. For the first time in years, I was looking forward to whatever came next. Second place had finally learned how to win.